All right, folks, last half. Let's talk now about the importance of our conducting system in the heart, right? To make my life a little easier, I'm going to draw a little diagram as we go along. So you should be seeing my screen now. If not, let me know. So I'm going to do a really simple diagram of the heart, which I will use to help me to explain the whole conducting system thing, right? Remember, simple. All right. So we have here left ventricle, left atrium, right atrium, right ventricle. Okay. And those are our valves. So tricuspid valve and bicuspid valve. Okay. Now, within our right atrium, you're going to have a little bundle of cells. Okay. This is a bundle of specialized cells that are electrogenerative. They can generate an electrical impulse, is what I'm saying, right? And this bundle of cells here is called the SA node. So that's the sinoatrial node, okay? So sinoatrial, in brackets up here, node. So SA node. Now, the purpose of the SA node is to generate an electrical impulse that is going to spread now to the rest of the heart, okay? So it is going to help to control the rhythm of the heart, how often the heart beats, how strongly the heart beats, right? And because of this, it is also referred to as the heart's pacemaker, right? So anyway, so the pacemaker generates an impulse and the impulse spreads out, right? Now, as the impulse spreads, it causes the heart muscle to depolarize. And as you know from muscle contraction in ANP1, depolarization leads to muscle contracting. So as the heart muscle in the atria depolarizes, it contracts. So now we have the right atrium and the left atrium receiving that signal. And because the signal is moving at a good fraction of the speed of light, it causes both right and left atria to contract at about the same time, right? So in the um, upper, towards the upper left, Sinoatrial node generates the impulse. You have right atria contracting. Generally speaking, you know, somewhere in the region of about 75 times per minute. That is what the sinoatrial node is doing, sending out the signal, right? Now, in the same right atrium, you have another bundle of cells. But this is lower down now in your atria. This little bundle of cells here now, which of course is near the junction between the atria and the ventricle, is known as the AV node. AV stands for atrioventricular node, okay? So AV node, atrioventricular, okay? Now, the AV node is also going to receive the same signal the pacemaker is sending out, okay? But AV node does something important. The AV node receives a signal, then it waits 0.12 seconds. So that's a delay. And then it is going to send its own signal, okay? So, remember now, sinoatrial node, found in the upper part of the atrium, right atrium, generates an impulse around 75 times per minute. Impulse spreads from the SA node, goes into and depolarizes the muscle of the right atrium, left atrium at the same time. Once the muscles depolarize, of course, you get your contraction, right? At the same time, the AV node is also receiving a signal. But the AV node, once it gets the signal, it holds off for 0.12 seconds before it does anything. So it gets the signal, holds on. After it receives the signal for that 0.12 seconds, it is going to send its own signal. But this signal is going specifically now to a structure that is coming out of it. And this structure here leaves from the AV node and goes into the septum. This is your interventricular septum.
Excuse me, sir.
Go ahead.
Could you repeat the last part about from the signal?
Yeah, man,
So this,
I'm going to. I have to. Don't worry yourself. So remember now, the AV node waits the 0.12 seconds and then sends its own signals out to a special structure. And this special structure leads from the AV node into the septum. And this structure is known as the bundle of His. So it's in purple here. That's the bundle of, and H-I-S, pronounced His. It's not an English word. Just go with it, right? It's not his, it's his. Now the signal runs down the bundle of His and eventually splits into two sections. And each one of these sections goes into a different ventricle. Okay? So we have two parts. And we call this a bundle branch. Because of course, it's a branch of the bundle of His. Okay? So we have two of them. We have a left bundle branch and a right bundle branch that goes down the septum and then into the walls of the ventricles where the muscle is. Okay? So far, so good, hopefully, right? Now, branching off of these branches, you're going to find these fine little extensions coming off like that. And these extensions that I'm drawing here are going into the ventricle muscle. All right? Now, these branches are known as Purkinje fibers. All right? Now, here's the thing. The signal that was generated by the AV node that runs down the bundle of His, that runs into the bundle branches, can only affect the ventricle muscle when they reach the Purkinje fibers. Okay? The first time you get a Purkinje fiber is down here near the apex of the heart. And then from there, they sweep up into the muscle. So wherever you have the Purkinje fibers, the ventricles will start to contract, which means that, remember what I said to you about the ventricle, how the heart contracts? It twists and squeezes. So the position of the Purkinje fibers means the heart starts squeezing from the apex and twists and pushes blood up. So it's twisting and pushing blood up and out of the ventricles because this empties the maximum amount of blood possible out of the ventricles. So you start twisting from the apex and squeezing, and the twisting and squeezing continues all the way up the ventricles, squeezing the blood out. And that, of course, is how you empty the ventricles. All right? So, to run over from the beginning, let's go once again from the top. The original signal comes from the sinoatrial node in the top part of the right atrium, the upper right atrium. That signal spreads into the atria right and left, causing them to contract at the same time. Once that happens, of course, blood gets pushed into your ventricles. Okay? Then now, you're going to have the signal also reaching the atrioventricular node, the AV node, which is in the lower part of the right ventricle, right? The right atria, I should say, near the ventricle. That's why it's called the atrioventricular node, because it is near the junction of the atria and the ventricle. When the AV node receives a signal, there's a 0.12 second delay before it does anything. Why is there a delay? I can now explain why. Because you need time to fill the atria with blood before you do anything else. You don't want the ventricles to contract empty. So the 0.12 second delay is enough to squirt the blood from the atria into the ventricles, get the ventricles ready now to contract. Then after that 0.12 second delay, you send that signal now down the bundle of His, which goes from the AV node into this interventricular septum. And it carries a signal down the bundle of His until the bundle of His splits into two fibers, which are your bundle branches. You have one on the right, which goes into the wall, the right ventricle. You have one on the left, which goes into the walls of the left ventricle. Then coming off of these branches, you're going to have what are called the Purkinje fibers. And the Purkinje fibers take the signal traveling down the bundle branches and send that signal to your heart's muscle, to the ventricular muscle, myocardium. And it causes the myocardium to contract. since the bundle branches are mainly going to start down here near the apex, this is a simplistic diagram, don't forget from it, please, because there are other branches that go into papillary muscles, but we're not getting into that right now. So the idea here is that you're starting the contraction from the apex. And remember, squeeze and twist from the apex to push the maximum amount of blood out. And of course, when this is happening, your valves are closed, so the blood is forced out of the heart. All right. Any questions there? All right. With that said, we can just move on now. Look now at our presentation. So it mentions here, the SA node generates impulses about 75 times per minute, which is why, of course, the average heart rate is normal, somewhere between 75 and 80. That's pretty normal, right? AV valve, here we have our 0.1 second delay. And remember why the delay is there, to allow the ventricles to fill properly, right? And it mentions the impulse passes from the atria to ventricles via the bundle of His, which I mentioned a little while ago, and that the bundle splits into the branches here, and the branches carry the impulse down to the apex of the heart via the Purkinje fibers. So the information is all here, right? So that is what causes your heart to contract and contract in a particular way. It causes the heart to contract with the atria going first, then the ventricles getting in, right? And a delay in between. Now, that said, the contraction of the heart, it can be monitored using what is known, as I'm sure you all know, as an ECG, your electrocardiogram, okay? The ECG, that's the one, I'm sure you've seen it in movies, you haven't seen it in real life, where they have the electrodes pasted onto the person's chest, and then you have a little machine that's doing a little beeping sound at the side. That is used to monitor what's going on in their heart. That is your ECG. Now, generally speaking, when you look at it, it makes this weird line when it beeps. This is the ECG trace. That's the line it makes when it beeps. Okay? The purpose of this line, of course, is multifaceted. The rate of the line tells us how fast the heart is beating. The shape of the line tells us what parts of the heart are depolarizing at any given time, and whether or not the depolarization is normal or abnormal in length or intensity or anything like that, right? So what I'm looking at here is one heart contraction and the electrical activity associated with it. So this line is looking at the change in voltage in the heart muscle over time, okay? So we can break this down into sections, okay? So what you see here as the P wave is referring now to the depolarization of the atria. So the atria have received the signals from the sinoatrial node. They're depolarizing. They're basically contracting now at this stage, right? And pushing blood into the ventricles. And because the muscles are depolarizing, the voltage rises, which is why you go from a flat line and then you get this peak. So that's the voltage change associated now with the atria depolarizing, beginning to contract. Then, of course, the ventricles the atria are going to relax, and you'll notice, of course, that the voltage drops back down, and then now it flatlines for a while because the atria, sorry, are relaxing at this stage. Then now you have this big spike afterwards. Now during this period here, when the atria are relaxing, that's called the PR interval. Right? So P to R interval. So P dash R. Okay? Atria relaxing, ventricles haven't started contracting yet. Then now you have this big, massive spike. You initially have a drop in the voltage, right? Because of course the atrioventricular valve is getting ready to send a signal. Then once the signal is sent, you have initial drop, then this massive spike up as the ventricles depolarize and generate a massive amount of voltage. Then once they repolarize, the voltage drops back down again. So that's the ventricle relaxing now, it repolarizes, and then eventually comes back up to normal. Okay. We call this the QRS complex. All right, QRS complex. This is only for the ventricles. When the QRS complex is showing, the ventricles are contracting. All you can see are the ventricles contracting. Now, while the ventricles are contracting, the atria are relaxing, okay? But you can't tell because the QRS overshadows whatever the ventricles are doing, right? Then now, once the ventricles relax, you get another spike in voltage called the T wave, right? So we remember now, we can't see the spike associated. It's probably somewhere like about here, a tiny little one showing showing the atria relaxing, but you can't see that because the voltage generated by the ventricles are so big, it hides it. But of course, the voltage generated by the ventricles when they relax is even bigger than the voltage generated when the atria contract. So you can clearly see that one, okay? So one more time. P wave, ventricular depolarization. That's an increase in voltage, right? Then the voltage drops down, then the ventricles will contract, causing ventricular depolarization here. While this is happening, the atria is relaxing, just atrial repolarization, but you can't see it because it's hidden by the ventricles contracting. Then now the ventricles start to relax, generating another voltage spike, and this is your T wave. And then from there, of course, everybody flat lines go back to normal until you have atrial contraction again. This, of course, is your refraction, your refractive period, right? So during this period, the atria can't contract yet, can't receive another signal of a contraction yet. It has to reach the end of the refractive period before it can receive another signal to contract. Okay, that is your trace. Okay, so P, Q, R, S, T are the major parts. Okay, and of course we have our PR interval and our ST interval here as well as minor parts. All right. Now, if we look here at some of the EKG traces, the top one here shows a normal trace, okay? So we have a spike here, so that's the P. And this big one here is QRS. Then we have another one here, that's T. Then this here, of course, is our refractory period, where nothing can happen. Before, of course, we get another P. And the whole thing starts again, right?
Sir,
Go ahead.
sorry, don't mean to cut you, but the plateaus, which you call the refractory period, and the dipping, is that the delay going on?
The delay is a flat line.
Oh, okay.
So even during the dipping, something is going on, right? Voltage is passing through the cells, right? And as voltage spikes and the cells have to repolarize, their voltage falls below normal. You remember when you were doing muscle contraction in AMP1, and when depolarization happened, you had to have a period of hyperpolarization, which means the voltage drops below normal to stop signal from going backwards. I don't know if you all remember that stuff. That's basically what's happening here. That's why you have a dip down. So you have a dip for both of them, right? So this is the stopping signal from going backwards dip. If you remember that stuff, right? Now, so remember now, this is your normal trace. This is what you hope to see when you go to the hospital. The bottom one here now, if you notice, the spikes for the QRS are not very tall. Actually, they're a little on the short side. But what is more important is how small the delay time is between the peaks. What this is saying is that the heart rate of this person is much higher than normal. The refractory period is shorter in this person. Okay? So the heart is contracting more quickly. So the heart is racing, as they say, right? So that is tachycardia, heart beating too fast. Now, if the opposite happens and the refractory period is much longer than it should be, that means your heart rate is very slow. This is called bradycardia, right? So tachy, as in tachyon, means very fast. Brady means slow. Then now we have another example here, which is premature atrial contraction. The idea here is that the atria is contracting too soon, right? So the ventricles aren't fully relaxed yet, and the atria is already started to contract. And because of that, the ventricles don't fill properly. As if you notice here, you're missing the drop down into the refractory period, into the hyperpolarization period here. It's a little hard to see here. So that is premature atrial contraction. The atria contracting before the ventricles are fully relaxed, right? Now, for the most part, what will be of greatest importance to us, because of course we don't have a lot of time, are just these three here. If I show you tachycardia or bradycardia, you should be able to recognize it relative to what normal rhythm looks like. As I said, this is a summer, so I won't kill you about the rest of them. Just make sure you know at least the first three on site, right? Make sure if you see the trace, you know what each one of the sections means. This is actually for the nurses in here. This is stuff you're going to need to know as a nurse. But once again, being summer, we're not going to worry so much about it. All right, so this here is showing you the ECG trace, and it is relating what is happening to the heart at the same time. So just make sure you give this a review for me, please, so that you can trace what's going on in the heart, during not only via the contractions of the heart, but also how the electrical conductive system causes the various contractions of the different parts of the heart. All right, we have like 30 minutes left, so we can start lymphatic system. Remember, I will be continuing on Thursday, Friday with lymphatic system and respiratory system, right? Also note your first tutorial is, where is it?
Yes, sir. Can you tell me where the video for it is that you were talking about?
For the tutorial? There's no video for the tutorial. What are we talking about?
Well, sir, may I try to understand? Because thought I heard that it's due on Thursday and that there was a pre-recorded video to watch or
But
something and
for
fill out the.
the tutorial,
Yes, sir. I'm gonna see it, so that's I'm trying to find out. Start
I'm gonna be
clear up.
honest with you, I'm not really sure what you're talking about.
So, all right. So, all right, sir. For the tutorial, you didn't record a video. It's just fill it out, send it in.
I'm not aware of any video, if I'm honest. There's a
Sir, I think he's
submission.
mixing it up with the lecture.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah.
So here I have, as I say here, on a unit 9, we have tutorial submission opened on the 12th. So what all you do is you download the tutorial for Blood, you complete it, you upload it. I will not be able to go through the tutorial this week, but I'm still expecting to come in on time, which is latest Thursday, 9 a.m. on the 19th. Once we catch up in the lectures, then we can run through the tutorials, right?
Sir, I have one more question. Is
Go
it
ahead.
also true that you want persons in the Friday tutorials attend the one at 9 on Thursday in the
Yeah,
morning?
yeah, because there's hardly anybody in the Friday afternoon. I think it's like 9 people showed up. And man, pretty much everybody said they can come to the Thursday one or the earlier Friday one. So I said, all right, let's just do that instead.
Okay, so it doesn't really matter which one I turn up to, just as long as I come to one.
Just as long as you're there.
Okay.
So, all right. I think I said I wanted to do the lymphatic system for the last 20 minutes, and then I'll let you go. Let's see. Is this it? Oh no. Oh yeah, no, this is it. Having a little problem here. This is the lymphatic system I normally use during a regular class time, and it's a little longer than it's a lot longer than what I would normally use over the summer, because once again, summer is very contracted period of time. So give me a quick second here. Let me dig up the lymphatic system lecture, and then I will upload it right after this. Yeah. So this one here, I'm going to upload it right after class, is what we'll use because this is shorter. So that makes it a little easier for everybody involved. So it's only going to contain what I would think would be, pretty much the most important things to know about the lymphatic system. Not that other things aren't important, but once again, in the interest of time, because we don't have a lot of it, we have to sort of limit ourselves somewhat, right? Okay, first of all, what is the lymphatic system? Lymphatic system is a system that works alongside the blood, right? So it works in tandem with the cardiovascular system. Its purpose is multifaceted, but one of its main functions is to take excess fluid from around your tissues, known as tissue fluid, or interstitial fluid if you prefer, and bring this tissue back to the blood, okay? That's what it's mainly for. It also has a very important function in your immune system, okay? Now, hopefully, lymphatic system sounds like lymphocyte to you. Because the lymphatic system is loaded with lymphocytes, which of course, as you know, are white blood cells. right? They're agranulocytes. I'm sure everybody knows that. And they travel all around the body via the lymphatic system. Remember, lymphocytes can dip into the blood and dip back out. They can travel all about the place. So it is another highway they use to move around the blood. But in addition to that, within the lymphatic system, there are special structures, special organs that house white blood cells, like your T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes, that are used to screen your body for infection, right? So they're extremely important. So not only do they collect up excess fluid from around your tissues and send it back to your blood, stopping, preventing edema, swelling, they're also constantly monitoring the fluids passing through them for pathogens, right? So it mentions here the lymphatic system, which of course is a fluid connective tissue, as I'm sure you know already. Has lymph, that's the fluid part. It of course has lymphocytes as the cells, and it also has fibrinogen as the fibers. So it is a connective tissue, just like blood, right? That said, lymph, which is the fluid, remember, travels in special lymphatic vessels. So in that way, it's very similar to the circulatory system. It has its own major organs, similar to what the circulatory system has as well, right? And remember, its function, it returns excess fluids back to the bloodstream. It also transports fats and also other substances in the body that are hydrophobic. I'm showing, I think everybody should remember what hydrophobic means, right? So if it's a hydrophobic substance, it tends to get dumped into the lymphatic system first before it goes into the blood, right? And of course, you mentioned the importance of the T lymphocytes and those special organs for monitoring the body, right? Now, so remember once again the three main functions. So yeah, I'm ticking this slide because it's so important, right? It's just the same thing again. Now, one of the tissues of your lymphatic system will be your lymph nodes. And lymph nodes are very, very important. They are centers of immune system. Think of it this way. A lymph node is like a police station, right? Or what do you call it there? A roadblock. The idea here is, of course, that lymph passes through the lymph nodes, and in the lymph nodes, you have lots of white blood cells. And as fluid is passing through the lymph nodes, the lymph is passing through, the white blood cells are screening the lymph. They're looking for things that shouldn't be there. And it allows them to respond quickly if there's something in the lymphatic tissue, fluid that shouldn't be there. They can rapidly replicate and form large quantities of the appropriate lymphocyte, and then from there flood the rest of the body and get rid of whatever infectious agent they might find, right? So it mentions here that this is looking, of course, at the intestines, and it shows here all of these lumps. These are lymph nodes. So all of them here are monitoring your digestive tract, looking for things from the blood coming from the lymphatic fluid, I should say, coming from the tissues of your intestines. It collects up all of this fluid, passes it through the lymph nodes, and it's screening, right? Your in your digestive tract in particular has lots and lots of lymph nodes associated with it. Okay? I believe they refer to as Peyer's patches. So it looks a little patchy. Now, here's the reason for it. If you think about it, the places you're the most likely to get some foreign agent into your body is through your nasal cavity, as you can breathe it in, right? Or, of course, your digestive tract through food. I mean, I'm sure everybody in here has had diarrhea at some point in their life. At some point, you put something in your mouth you shouldn't have. And of course, you suffer the consequences, right? The purpose of all of these lymph nodes here is that when you're breaking on the food and whatever else, and you're absorbing the contents into your bloodstream, and from around before it even gets to your bloodstream, substances move to the surrounding tissue. And then some of that fluid goes to the surrounding tissue, goes into your lymphatic system, and passes through now these lymph nodes. And of course, at that point, the lymph node can screen the fluid, which is, remember, getting substances from the food you're eating, and it can look for pathogens, etc. And if it picks up pathogens, of course, one of the first things it can do is trigger diarrhea to try and remove the contaminated food from your intestines, right? So these lymph nodes are extremely important. If they weren't there, I mean, you might think, boy, diarrhea is so terrible. But remember, without the diarrhea, you would have an intestine full of infectious agent to spread to the rest of your body, right? Which is worse. So as it says here, lymph nodes trap and sometimes become swollen with bacteria that has invaded the body and the white blood cells that fight that bacteria. So sometimes your lymph nodes will get very swollen and filled with pus, right? And the pus is formed, of course, from dead bacteria, dead white blood cells, and tissue fluid. So there's literally a battle going on in your lymph nodes, right? Now, remember I said to you, generally speaking, you're going to find lymph nodes concentrated in areas where you're most likely to take in infectious agents. So we mentioned the intestinal tract already and the Peyer's patches. But see, does it make sense to you that you also have lymph nodes in and around the mouth, right? Because of course, that's where you're putting the food in. So yeah, so you have lymph nodes under the tongue, you have parietal nodes, yeah, with the lingual nodes, right? Which are there, of course, once again, to monitor what is going on with what you're taking in. You also have lymph nodes concentrated in the groin region. That's the groin. I do believe that there is syphilis. I don't know to spell syphilis. So of course, why there? Because STDs have a tendency to, start there. So it makes sense to have lymph nodes there to fight off STDs coming in, right? Now, it also mentions here that the lymphatic system plays an important role in the development and spread of cancer. Cancer that starts in the lymph nodes is called a lymphoma. When cancer cells break off a tumor and spread into the lymph nodes, it is known as a metastatic cancer. Here's the thing. Cancer cells have a tendency to live without having to be in a tissue. So if you have a cancerous lump, let's say it mentions here breast tissue, okay? That breast cancer, if it stays in the breast, is not so dangerous these days. Worst come to worst, you lose a breast, you have another one, you live your life, right? But there are lots and lots of lymphatic vessels running through the breast tissue. And if one of these cancer cells or a few of these cancer cells break off of the main tumor and then go from there into the lymphatic system, they can be carried to all parts of the body because all parts of the body are connected to the lymphatic system. And once that happens, we say the cancer has metastasized, which is the worst thing you can hear when it comes to cancer. It means the cancer is no longer in one local area, it's all about. And from that point on, most people, when you hear the word metastasis, it's sort out your business, you won't be around for much longer, right? So it's not a good thing. That said, this lovely diagram here shows you the divisions and spread of the major lymphatics of the body. Please make sure you give this one a look. You're going to need to have a functional working knowledge of the positions of the main things. So for example, the thymus, thoracic ducts, lumbar lymph nodes, cisternae of Chile, spleen, the gut-associated lymphatic tissue, like the Peyer's patches, pelvic lymph nodes, inguinal nodes. These are all very important. Of course, tonsils, cervical, right, lymphatic nodes, they're all important to know, right? So please remember that, right? Pretty much everything here is important to know. Now, that said, let's talk about general lymphatics. We need to get to at least slide. We need to get to at least this slide before we call it that night. Okay, so as it mentions here, your lymphatic system is going to originate in the form of lymphatic capillaries. And lymphatic capillaries are going to be found in the tissues. And these capillaries are going to merge together to form larger lymphatic vessels. And these vessels are very similar to veins. By that I mean they're very, very thin-walled, very low pressure, and they have valves in them, right? As a matter of fact, your lymphatic vessels is like a more extreme vein. Because veins have thin walls, as you know, where lymphatic vessels have even thinner walls. Veins have low pressure, lymphatic vessels have even lower pressure, right? Veins have a large lumen, lymphatic vessels have even larger lumens and even more valves. So a lymphatic vessel is an extreme vein, basically, right? It mentions here now that these lymphatic vessels connect to lymph nodes at intervals. Remember what the lymph nodes are for? They're for screening the lymph in the vessels. So it makes sense to have them as checkpoints as you go along, right? But it says eventually though, the lymph is funneled into two main channels, and this sends the lymph to the blood. You have the right lymphatic duct, and this duct is going to drain the right side of the head and neck, right arm, right thorax. This empties into the right subclavian vein. Then you have the thoracic duct that does the rest of the body and empties into the left subclavian vein. This is an important slide. All right. So far, we've gone two super important slides. This one and that one, right? So this is showing you what your lymphatic capillaries start out at. They start out as what we call blind ending tubes. Okay. So here we have our normal blood capillaries. And our blood capillaries, of course, are open on both sides. So that's one side. Here's the other side. Both sides are open tube. Here's our lymphatic capillary in green. It starts out as a pouch, right? So already we can see a distinct difference between how the lymphatic capillaries and the blood capillaries look. Both of them, of course, are made up of endothelium though, right? So one of the things about the lymphatic capillaries is that the cells themselves overlap like this. So in the pouch, the cells are set up like this. Now, why do we need this to happen? This overlap here acts as a one-way valve. It allows fluid to go in, but not to come back out, right? So remember, regular blood capillaries are not like that. Regular blood capillaries are continuous. All the cells are packed together. There are no spaces in between them like this, right? Normally. So the overlapping shingles-like arrangement of these lymphatic capillary cells at the end of the pouch allows you to load now your lymphatic capillaries with fluid. Remember, all of this around this is tissue fluid. Once the tissue fluid moves into the lymphatic vessel, it is now lymph, okay? And remember, it is these overlaps that allow that. There's no overlapping going on in the red blood in the blood capillaries. Please remember, right? So that's another difference between blood capillaries and lymph capillaries. So let's go through the two differences we've gone so far. Blood capillaries are continuous on both sides. Lymph capillaries start as blind ending tubes. Blood capillary cells are packed tightly together. Lymph capillary cells are overlapping with spaces to allow for loading, right, of fluid from the tissues. So those are two important distinctions, right? We can even mention that the pressure in lymph capillaries is much lower than the pressure in blood capillaries as well, okay? Now, where do you find lymphs? As I mentioned, the lymphs are found everywhere except, go ahead, Tavia.
Excuse me, sir. On the side, you have no BM. I'm not sure if you said what it meant. BM. The slide before. Yeah.
Basement membrane.
Okay, okay. All right.
Now, everywhere except for this, you find lymphatic capillaries everywhere except for the central nervous system and the bone marrow. Of course, the cornea as well. And cartilage, as you all know, is very, very vascularly deficient. So everywhere else, all the muscles and the areolar tissue and the adipose tissue and all of those places, you're going to have lymphatic capillaries absorbing that excess fluid from around these tissues and funneling it through the lymph back to the blood. Okay. The first time you would probably have heard of your lymphatic vessels is when you were doing digestive system at CSEC. You'd have mentioned a lacteal. They have said to you the lacteal is a capillary, or maybe they didn't even say it was a capillary. They say it was a vessel inside your villus that absorbed fatty acid and glycerol from the digested food. That is where most of you would have heard about the lymphatic system. But I find that generally speaking at CSEC, they don't even tell you there's a separate system. They just say, hey, this thing absorbs fatty acid and glycerol and send it back to the blood. So remember now, they do it. It's a part of your lymphatic system. So lacteals are lymphatic capillaries, right? And of course, you have your normal blood capillaries absorbing the glucose and the amino acids, as you know, right? Now, remember I mentioned to you that lymphatic vessels are formed when capillaries merge together to form them, right? And that inside your lymphatic vessels, you have lots of valves, more valves than veins. They're even more obvious than in veins because wherever you have a lymphatic valve forming, you get a bulge. You notice here bulge and bulge and bulge, right? Even here in the actual thing, you can clearly see here the bulge. And you can even, if you look carefully, see the structure of the valve inside, okay? Now, it means, of course, that once again, just like in veins, this is to stop the backflow of blood, right? Prevents the backflow of blood. Now, this here is looking at the two major vessels I mentioned earlier, the right subclavian vein, sorry, the right lymphatic duct, which empties into the right subclavian vein, and the thoracic duct, which empties into the left subclavian vein. This is just showing you exactly where it's located, okay? All right, we're basically out of time. All right, I'll stop here, and we'll finish this up on Thursday, Friday. Remember, you can come to any one of them you want, right? We're at slide, how much is this? All right, we're at slide 14, so we're about halfway through it, and then I'll start respiratory system, okay?
So the first recording that you did, that was blood.
Yeah,
Can you tell me where it is?
Moodle. It links to a YouTube video. So
Okay,
I will
so
put up this tonight's own after class. Go ahead, Kayla.
Sir, in terms of the exercises from the lab manual, when would those be due? Because some of us from the Wednesday lab, we didn't get the manual back.
I know, as I said, I'm not harassing anybody about them right now. So I won't even look at them for another week or so.
Okay.
Mhm. All right, let's see. There's a message in the chat. Message. Okay, I don't know what the message is. All right. So I'm gonna need a little. Actually, I can't put it up immediately. I just remember I have to cut it up because I have to take off the first part of it when we're talking. Before I upload it. Otherwise, so don't expect it immediately, but give me an hour or so, and then I will upload it. Uh, what was it? Tajwani says she emailed me. I assume you meant today. I'll check it after class. Once again, as I said earlier, the first tutorial is already there. Just go on Moodle, you'll see it, and as well as the turn-in date. All right, any other questions? All right, so let me stop here since I don't want to have to cut the video too much.